so I thought we would go through this David Conte =sign website. I have gone through it in the past a little bit, but I haven't really gone through too much of it. So my search history is obviously a little skewed here. But if you search David Conte =sign, you'll get a link to this. You'll find in the search results you'll get a link to this website, which brings you here, which says God for all intents and purposes is an =sign, and then we get a reference to Navidson. But I'm not going to go right to this page. I'm going to go to this page, which is without the entertainment section. You come to here, and I'm just going to go to entertainment. Yeah. So this page says, if there's one word to describe Falmouth, Maine, it would be quiet. Actually, that probably doesn't even really do my hometown justice. Still motionless and undisturbed silent. That gives you a better idea of what night is like. In the middle of the night, I would look out the window like I was staring at a picture, and the only sound in the sky was the howl of the wind or the crashing of waves against the rocks. In the silent darkness of night is when an imagination can truly run wild. Without anything to perceive, the mind looks inward down hallways of the cerebral cortex you didn't even know existed. So I'm going to open this link in a new window. And it's interesting that it turns red, right? Yeah, that's what this was. I love Jurassic Park. I didn't need to sleep for this nightmare to play out in my head. Every midnight trip to the bathroom provided for the same suspense. Looking out that bathroom window, I would always wait for it. I was always waiting for something to break the silence. I'll never forget that feeling the first time I heard the sound. A sound powerful enough to translate still water into a miniature wave pool. With each pulse, the sound became louder and deeper. With each step, sent P-waves reverberating through the car, turning the small wave pool into a squall. Then as quickly as the sound arrived, it ended, and there was nothing, no sound, no vibrations, nothing except for the eye, the scariest dinosaur in every child's nightmare, Tyrannosaurus Rex. The scene in Jurassic Park internalized every fear I have of the night. Silence is always waiting for the sound. Darkness is always waiting for the light. When I would take those midnight trips to the bathroom, I was always waiting to see the reverberations of sound transmit through the porcelain and to look out that window into the nothing and see the eye. Night had never made me feel comfortable before, but after JP, the fear had a face. The funny thing is that even now when I go home, I still get the same feelings. Maybe I go to bed a little easier, but I'll always look out for the window into the night, waiting for something. So it's like interesting. The growl, I guess we can hear in House of Leaves, or the growl that we're supposed to hear, could be the growl of the T-Rex. Who knows? But what we want to do here is actually click on this doorway, and we get a reference to the Navidson records. I haven't cleaned my cache in a while, so I have all these links would be blue, but they are red because I have clicked on them. Just to make things easier, I'm just going to open them all into a new window. So this is about objects. Objects can be categorized into 3 classes: those that exist in space and time, those that could exist in space and time, and those that cannot exist in space and time. So for example 1, the round square. Example 2, any object whose dimensions are larger than outside dimensions. And example 3, any other object not explained by physics. The human brain qualifies as object number 1, those that exist in space and time. It has dimensions, it has mass, it occupies space and time. In the sense, it is a normal object. A paradox exists, though. Inside the maze of gray matter encased by our skulls lies our mind, which knows no laws of physics. It is classic object number 3. It stretches out infinitely in all directions, yet occupies no space and no time. It does not exist. It has no home. Interesting. This, the type of object that Heidegger would describe as the unheimlich. These objects are the nothing and nowhere. They are indescribable, indefinable, and incomprehensible. To define and explore the mind requires being in, which enters into Heidegger explains as the existential mode of the node at home. That should probably be not at home. But we know there's no errors. Nothing else is meant by our talk about uncanniness. So I'm going to click on this link. So this is interesting, this idea of the mind being bigger than the brain, the hallway being bigger than the house, and what does the hallway represent? The mind, and getting lost in there. Oh, that brings us back to this page. So I'm going to open up equations. And this was the page that you'd get if you had just Googled this David Kant quote. God, for all intents and purposes, is an equal sign, and at least up until now, something humanity has always been able to believe in is the universe adds up. A plus B equals C. Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, Rutherford, Bohr, Einstein, Heisenberg, or even more fundamentally, Judaism, Taoism, Buddhism. So it's interesting, we get these scientific minds and then references to these religions. Judaism especially plays a big part in House of Leaves. We've only so far, up to chapter 4, come up to 2 references so far that I caught to Judaism. We get the reference to Succoth Street, or Succoth Lane, or whatever it's called, which is the cross-section of where the house is at Ash Tree Lane in Succoth. And Succoth is a Jewish literal House of Leaves. I think I'll, like a... Succoth hut. Where you can see, like, it's a little hut and then there's leaves placed over top of it, like that, for a Jewish celebration. And then we get a reference to Karen as Eve, but there are multiple references after chapter 4 to Judaism. I don't know, I'm not as familiar with Taoism and Buddhism, but I'm sure there's probably references in House of Leaves to them as well. They all set out for one thing: explain the unexplainable. That's what we do as people. We explain the uncanny. We give what is not at home a home. The quest of figuring out the universe is simply to eliminate the things in or lives we cannot explain. That's the driving force behind science and religion. Anything not at home is homeless, and to be homeless is to be uncanny. This is the reason for Navidson's obsession. He had to give the homeless a home. His case is of course special, though. The existential mode of the not at home for Navidson was not the behavior of the electron or the motion of the planets, which is what these guys were interested in, these scientists. It was his home, and it demanded explanation. For Navidson's explanation could only come from experience, from expeditions. What's interesting, though, is insight never comes from an expedition, it only comes from an exploration. The first 4 expeditions are only that, expeditions. They are thought out, planned, and goal-orientated. Of course, they all end with the same conclusion: nothing. Expedition 5 is the first attempt at an honest exploration. Navidson is even quoted saying, "I'm in no hurry." This is the first time that someone goes into the hallways and enters the existential mode of not at home. This time he is on a journey for comprehension, but the only way to achieve this is for Navidson is to strip it all away. Day by day, or night by night, whichever you prefer, Navidson begins to give himself up. Finally, when his body is in a state of dehydration and starvation, and his batteries are spent, and his last match is burned up, he gives up, and he gives himself over to the house. The result is him moving to Vermont, marrying Karen, and spending time with his wife. The house he sells, never to return to again, even though he admitted it is still a mystery. That doesn't seem to matter, though. It's a mystery that does not need any more solving, at least by him. Of course, the house was never what was uncanny in the first place. Eh? Or right? I'm Canadian, so I'd say A. Yeah, so this idea of having to make that house a home by giving it an explanation, and only doing that by giving himself up to the home and what the home represents, Karen and his kids. So there we see it is the love story. And if we click there, it brings us back again. So we got equations. I'm going to go to darkness next. Darkness is inherently unsettling. This text and the accompanying picture are sort of reliefs. In the microseconds that it took for you to realize this page is black, your body began releasing small amounts of neurotransmitters that signal for the release of hormones. That just popped up. From your adrenal medulla to dilate the pupils in your eyes, raise your blood pressure, and constrict the muscles in your anus. A typical stress response. I keep my page on dark mode, so I don't know if it had that kind of response on me, but the stress response, whether detectable or not is due to that unexplainable aspect of darkness, which in a way answers its own question. Let's consider the color black, which is really a misnomer. Black is not a color, it is the absence of light. Your eyes cannot actually see black, they can only see light. The rod cells in your eyes only secrete proteins when wavelengths between 400 nm and 700 nm reach your blank. So even while you think you're perceiving the numbers on the wall clock, in fact, you're really just observing a contrast of perception. A camera works no different. Light travels in through the lens of the camera and then reacts with silver halide salts on the film. Without light, there is no reaction, no perception. All that exists is the unsettling feeling of nothing, darkness. And down here, you'll notice if I hover over this, it tells me where it will take me. It'll just take me back to the page. So I'm not going to click on that. This is the irony of Will Navidson, the consummate photographer living in the house. Will's life is solely based on the idea of creating the perfect perception of the outside world. Anyone can speak of starvation, but Delisle is starvation. Unfortunately, or fortunately, for Will, the house is like the color black. It defies perception. It never mattered whether he used a 1962 H16 hand crank Bullock 16... blah 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 blah. There is nothing to perceive, and there is nothing he could do about it. This is the intriguing aspect of Expedition 5. When he finally reaches the moment of complete despair, he is no longer Will the photographer. Instead, he is Will the uncaring father, Will the insensitive brother, and Will the selfish lover. Perhaps the real irony of the house is the man acclaimed for his ability to perceive could not render into focus the most obvious thing in his life. Only a sea of darkness could Navidson see the truth. So here we get pretty much confirmation that House of Leaves is in fact a love story. So let's click on love next then. The last thing most people would think about during a threesome is images of their dying father. We haven't gotten to that part in the text yet, but hopefully you have read ahead, and this is not a spoiler for you. To Johnny, though, this is neither strange nor unsettling. The images of his father's flying above are possibly a relief from the reality of snorting lines off a CD case right before he pits it. We gave away our childhood for nothing, and we died, and condoms littered the floor. This is the paradox of the physical encounters Johnny finds himself in. There's always an inverse relationship between his physical reality and his emotional state. In this, the three are seemingly playing together, even giggling, yet as Johnny pits it, they are dying inside. A void is being created, in a sense they are moving apart. This is shown again in his encounter with Kyrie. Tabs, ecstasy, a car ride down dark roads into a desolate location. No kissing, no eye contact. The closer they move to the inevitable, the further apart they grow. This is an image of a rose. It's kind of weird because it's upside down and a little green here, but that's interesting. Reality subsides, the road leads into darkness, and they follow. They go on to fill the emptiness with what Johnny refers to as a dark language, which to him is a thing of beauty despite being unable to penetrate much, explore anything, or even connect. Terribly beautiful, but more often than not inadequate. It is these type of surreal moments which he reserves a word like beauty for to fully juxtapose his ideas with conventional thought. That's probably what that's supposed to say. When taken in the context of Johnny, though, these unusual descriptions make a considerable amount of sense. As he states in the beginning, what he is looking for may not even be real. This is perhaps his attraction to the house. His reality is infinitely full of things with no meaning, while the house is full of nothing and infinite meaning. In a way, it is another version of Johnny's dark language. There is beauty in its vacancy just as there is beauty in Thumper. She was the opposite of the other girls, zero physical and all mental. In a way, though, for Johnny, this made her more beautiful. Her beauty was sublime, just like the house. So maybe the link there. I'm hoping that you can get these things without me having to explicitly state them. Let's click on irony here. The Maginot Line. We do get a reference to the Maginot Line. I can't remember which chapter it's in, but we do. So we're talking about war. So is this about Zampano? Let's find out. The wondrous grandeur of the Maginot Line was only overshadowed by its complete and utter failure at protection. Its purpose was simple: defend good against evil. The specification of the defenses was very high, with extensive interconnected bunker complexes for thousands of men. There are 108 main forts at 15-kilometer intervals, smaller forts and casements between, with over 100 kilometers of tunnels. It was a steel blanket of military ignorance that kept the French sound asleep at night for years, which is of course why Johnny said irony is a Maginot Line drawn by the already condemned. There's the reference set it's referring to. Every year after World War I, the wall got bigger, more barricades were put up, more guard towers installed, more trenches were dug. Each year the facade grew, until in 1940 Germany's Blitzkrieg swept through the plains of Belgium around the line, and within weeks were marching towards the Arc de Triomphe under the tree-shaded streets of the Champs-Élysées. The French had been doomed all along. The entire time they had been sitting in Hitler's palm, blind to the inevitability of their own military had secured, which I would imagine would be enough to make Johnny smile. Who would the smile be for, though? At first glance from the context of the passage, footnote 211, it seems that Johnny might be smiling at the irony of his own life, when he remembers it's the 4th of July and the birth of a nation which doesn't give a shit about him, but he didn't remember his own birthday. The Maginot Line quite contradicts this in a subtle way, however. The irony of the Maginot Line that he finds amusing is the irony of ignorance, which is why he cannot be speaking about himself. It's impossible to be simultaneously ignorant and aware of a situation. So although there is a blitzkrieg coming for him, there is no Maginot Line. Johnny does go out of his way to take down his own defenses, and he welcomes whatever dark truth he might find. Friends, drugs, work, sex, they are all removed in order to discover what's waiting for him. Lude, however, forms a line. He digs trenches of ecstasy, he pits up guard towers of booze, and forms barricades of sex. He thought his defenses were strong, so did Johnny. Each month he did more and more defending his front with increasingly more zeal, until he finally reached an apex of consumption, whereupon he painted Sunset Boulevard with the red and white contents of his head. For all the seeming insanity of Johnny's life, he is the only one not living behind a facade, and I would imagine this would make him also smile. I think this is interesting. The Maginot Line also reminds me a lot of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which gets referenced in the introduction to House of Leaves, and that's the battle that we believe that Zampano fought in the Indochina War. I'm reading a book on that right now, and it seems that there was a similar situation there in that certain people thought that their defenses were built up and good, but they didn't. They were ultimately failures, much like this Maginot Line. Let's go back to the home. So we are back here. I don't know if that's all it has to say about the Navidson record, but I want to look at more of the website here. Let's go to click on community history. It just says use examples from pop culture to explain the third meaning of the epigraph. Follow the rainbow. Use a presentation of your writing to explain your overall concept. Follow the snowflake. What happens if I click this guy? Thought one. I had made her writing deep into the night by candlelight until the tiny black letters blurred into stitches, and I began to feel that I was sewing a great quilt. I don't know. I'm just gonna search this. Oh. Or just follow this through. What's interesting, though, is insight never comes from an expedition, it only comes from an exploration. I wrote this in the past, however I am analyzing it now in the present in order to predict how I'll act in the future. There's a special quality ascribed to first draft writing, which is exactly where the preceding passage came from. It is unencumbered by the technicalities of review and editing. It is a pure form of thought without regret or consideration for what a peer or teacher may think. First drafts are non-accidental snippets from our self-conscious. When I wrote that goal-oriented expedition provides less truth than pure exploration, I did not consider what the implied views about my own views on life. At the time, I was simply stating why I felt Navidson's final trip into the hallways was the most enlightening. This conclusion, however, was not an accident or a mere coincidence. It was the response that I would give when presented with any hypothetical situation with similar circumstances. I believe in discovery, which is why I am a man of science. The rules that govern science are merely theories that exist to be later disproved by a better idea. There's a general understanding in science that what we know and think may or may not be correct. Take the theory of evolution, for example. The only reason its existence is possible is due to people realizing that they may have not figured everything out. This was Holloway's problem. He wasn't considering what he didn't know. He didn't now. He didn't go into the hallways to experience them. He went in to find their end. When Navidson made up his final trip in the dark abyss, he was quoted saying, "I'm in no hurry. This small snippet of information is just like a first draft." Navidson may not have realized it, but he was taking on the role of the explorer. He wasn't worried about collecting samples or finding an end. Maybe one did not exist, and that was fine with him. He was just walking. When I write, I do not start with a preconceived conclusion and then simply work to support it. I start with an idea and see where it takes me. That is how you discover. Let's follow this to thought 3. This is how I live my life. And that will take us back to history. Interesting. I'm going to click on I'm going to click on the rainbow because that's rule 1. There, where the shadows thrown by the radiant future fall across the present and blot out the past, where everyone is going to be somebody, I felt the pleasant conviction that with money, friends, and luck, nobody had to be monstrous. Oh, that is a pain on the eyes. I'll try and read it, though. The great American dream, or at least the one which brought immigrants from around the globe to America, was to leave your children better off than yourself. The future was what mattered. The present was merely a means to an end, and the past was forgotten. It was escaped from. At some point, though, what constituted success in realizing that dream changed. The dreams of immigrant farmers, just hoping for a plot of land to raise a family, dissolved away, and the era of the gold rush emerged. Scale is what changed. Bud Fox said in Wall Street that there is no respect in poverty. Of course, the poverty he was referring was the middle-class lifestyle, a far cry from the barely being able to provide food and roof to sleep under. The honest lifestyle of Bud's father was not enough. Bud wanted to be a player. He wanted money, sex, and power. He wanted the world. From a pop culture standpoint, the move that resonates this change most effectively is Scarface, the poor Cuban immigrant who goes on to be the most powerful drug dealer in America, lying face down in front of a globe with the phrase, "The world is yours," orbiting it like the rings of Saturn, almost enough to bring a tear to your eye. It is no coincidence that the movie became the war cry of poor inner-city kids. Every rapper on MTV Cribs has a shrine dedicated to Tony Montana in their house, which is really no surprise. Tony Montana is the evolution of the American dream, going from absolutely nothing to having absolutely everything. In today's world, the dream is to get rich or die trying, and this is not simply at the level of poor inner-city kids. Stockbrokers are no different. They are killing themselves with their stressed-out, balls-to-the-wall lifestyle that turns them into tickling heart-attack time bombs, all in an effort to buy more cars, houses, and drugs. The middle class is not exempt from these fantasies either. Bud's dad in Wall Street is the exception. The lottery for the middle class is that gold pot at the end of the rainbow. It is the hope that grass will be greener on the other side of the present, which is exactly what a dream represents. Grandeur is assumed, so although the scale of the American dream has changed, the role of the future, present, and past have not. Sadly, it seems that happiness will always live in an impossible future. Interesting. I've done a lot of research into Scarface on something else. I'm just now wondering how that links to House of Leaves. Okay, so that was pop culture to explain the third meaning of the epigraph. What epigraph? Huh. I wonder if this is... I'm going to try and select it. Can I right click it? Okay. Do I have a copy of the book open? I don't. Pardon me. I'm going to see all my notes here. I have a copy of the book here. And I'm just going to see if this line is in the actual book. I don't remember it. But when that loads, here we go. Can you just... Here it is. Oh. Thank you for your patience while this loads. Okay, I'm not going to type that whole phrase in, but that phrase was, nobody had to be monstrous. I'm going to look up that. I highly recommend getting a digital copy of the book. I recommend reading it in the physical format, but searching things is easier in an e-copy. Nobody had to be monstrous. No, it's not. Not in there. Okay. I guess we'll follow the snowflake. Chromosomes and stuff. There are ghosts in the form of recessive genes that never show themselves to us but might appear to our children, to the seventh son of a seventh son. red hair suddenly out of a clear blonde lineage. So this idea of the seventh son of a seventh son is in a lot of mythology, but in Judaism, there's this sin will be passed on 77 generations or something like that. So it'd be interesting there. A snowflake is one of nature's true works of art. They have 6 symmetric arms branching out to form a hexagonal crystal structure of which no two are the same. That's at least what you learn in elementary school, especially if you go to school in Maine. The truth, however, is that there could technically be 2 identical snowflakes. Snowflakes are made of water molecules that arrange themselves in a crystal formation based on environmental conditions such as temperature, humidity, etc. Although it is extremely improbable for 2 objects to have the same molecular structure, it is not impossible. Considering the unimaginably large quantity of snowflakes that have fallen every year since the dawn of the atmosphere, it seems reasonable to think that the 2 snowflakes could be exactly the same. The possibility, of course, takes the fun and romanticism out of the diversity of the world. So, who are the snowflakes? Not in the political term, but in the term here. Who are the snowflakes in House of Leaves? Interesting. Okay, we have nothing in the red, blue, and purple, which are the significant colors of House of Leaves. I don't know what this has to do with House of Leaves. I'm just exploring the site more. People like snowflakes are a creation of environmental conditions. Instead of water molecules, though, we have nucleic acids that are bonded together in both peptide and hydrogen fashion to form the famous double helix. These strands of DNA are then wrapped around histone proteins and condensed into the more familiar chromosome. Within those strands of DNA lie genes. The word gene has had and will continue to have many different definitions that biologists will argue over. The simplest and, in my opinion, most concise definition is offered by Danish botanist Wilhelm Johansen, who considers genes to be the fundamental physical and functional unit of heredity. Holding true to the idea of art with this definition, you can imagine genes as the droplets of paint that compose a portrait, or possibly even the patches of fabric that put together a quilt. So maybe this idea of this quilt, this is the second time we've had it, has to do with us trying to put together the pieces of House of Leaves into one quilt. I don't know. To say that you are an original creation unlike any other is similar to saying that there are no 2 snowflakes. You'd be correct in that, yes, your complexness is truly amazing, but your originality or complexity is only due to the diversity of what you are created from, which sadly is not very original at all. With every successful sperm that inseminates an ovum, a new combination of genes is formed. Maybe you'll get your eyes from your mom and your nose from your dad, but whatever the case, the genes themselves will be no different, barring mutation, of course. The genes that code for your hair are the same genes that existed in your mother and father, and then in their mothers and fathers, and so on up the family tree. What changes is the combination, just like a snowflake. As Richard Dawkins explains in River Out of Eden, life is a river of genes flowing through geological time, and organisms are merely temporary bodies. We are merely complex patchworks made from the same threads. Okay. And lastly, if we click on the lighthouse here, we're going to link to Community 1, When I Was a Boy? Question mark? Everybody has probably heard this line from their parents before. It has to be one of the most simplistic parental tactics in the book. In my case, though, it was not my father regurgitating this line in order to justify my 10-minute walk to the bus stop in below freezing weather. Instead, it was one of my best friend's dads using it to offer his huge sage advice on how to be a Mainer. This was so because my parents were both transplants of the fair state of Maine. My mom was from a town in Pennsylvania, and my dad, who I spent the majority of my adolescence with, was from an upscale suburb outside of New York City. Despite both of my parents' affinity for the outdoors, neither possessed the typical Mainer traits, which I'll explain because most people have never encountered them. First off is the speech, which is kind of similar to a god-awful Southie Boston accent. R's are pronounced as H's, but it's not vice versa, so car is pronounced ka, just like Noma, ex-Red Sox shortstop is pronounced Noma, but house remains house. There we go. House. Also, there are unusual phrases like a ute, this is as close as I can come, which often takes the place of yes. These are really just few of the qualities of Maine dialect, which is at its full potential is almost unaudible. The reason I bring up the accent is because this is how my buddy's dad spoke, which is why he became my de facto teacher being a Mainer. Though his through his "When I Was a Boy" speeches, my friend's dad introduced me to things like chopping wood, lighting a wood stove, gun safety, hunting, gutting, and cleaning animals, and other wicked... I don't see the link there. Oh, that's cute. Wicked manly activities. That's another main gem. After some time, this is how I began to identify myself as a Mainer. I belonged to a group of people who were more independent. We could go out to a cabin in the woods without electricity or plumbing, and didn't matter. We didn't need to be pampered like the sissies in New York, Miami, or LA. We were tough and rugged. We shot animals and caught fish. We were men. Most of all, we never complained or made excuses. We always worked hard. Now, I don't know a lot about Mark Z. Danielewski, so I'm just gonna Google... where did he grow up? Let's check Wikipedia. So he was born in New York, but where was... I'm just gonna go to personal life. Oh, he's lived all over the world. Went to high school in Provo, Utah. So I don't know who this website is. I don't know if it's Mark Z. Danielewski or not. I don't... Is that... I wonder if I can do a reverse image search on this. That's not what I meant to do. I meant to do this one. Okay, yes, I know that's a moose. Okay, but... So there's the image there. So, what is this website? Oh. Okay, this is a Polish website, I think. So that's not Mark Z. Danielewski. I don't know where that image is from. Okay, I'm gonna look further into that on my own time. Okay. Oh. Where they got that image? Community 3. People from Maine work hard, and I don't mean 8 hours a day, 5 days a week hard. I mean, we do whatever it takes to get a job done. We don't complain about being tired or try to justify shortcoming. Most of all, we don't expect special treatment. These are some of the unique qualities that my friend's father taught me. It didn't matter that my buddy's dad owned an industrial company and a successful marina. My friend wanted a new pair of hockey skates. He was going to clean the barnacles at the bottom of the boat or cut thorn bushes. This no-nonsense mentality is what being a Mainer is about, and is what I have kept with me at school in Florida, although I have traded in flannel shirts for pastel polos, Carhartt pants for khakis, and hunting for hitting on sorority girls. I've never traded in the Maine work ethic. Someday when I'm older, I'll be the one telling my kid when I was a boy. Interesting. I don't know what that had to do with House of Leaves. I don't know if... I'm not going to go through the rest of this because it doesn't seem to reference House of Leaves. Maybe it was just that one section that did. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to look more into this website though, and maybe I'll put a note in the description if it has anything to do with House of Leaves. So thank you for coming on that exploration with me. Let me know if you got anything out of that and what you think of the website.